Hey folks, this is Kirk Almighty here. This is my Advanced Tactics Gold Strategy and Tactics video. I decided to create this video for mostly people who are still a little new to the game, and this is not a tutorial. I'm not going to necessarily teach you how to play the game. I'm going to assume you already got the basics down. You know how to move a unit, you know how to launch an attack, things like that. What I really want to do in this video is I want to dig deeper into the game mechanics itself and give you an idea of what the numbers in this mean, you know, when you're attacking a unit, and this is going to help you to formulate a better idea when you're creating a unit, exactly what type of subformations you want in there based on what you want to get out of that unit. One thing I would suggest you don't do, and I generally don't do, is I don't try to build these units that can do everything. Throwing in rifle units and mortars and submachine guns and machine guns and light tanks and everything, and just building it all into this one super unit that can go around and do anything you need it to do. And the reason I'll do that is because any situation you take that unit and put it in, whether it's attacking a city or it's out on the open plains or whatever, a specialized unit is going to be able to do better than what that unit can, because the elements you have in there in that unit that aren't going to contribute as a positive factor in whatever it is you're doing, whether you're attacking suburban or something, or actually is going to penalize you. So building specialized units, I believe, is a better way to go in this. You definitely want your armor to be able to maintain its speed, which is a big advantage, to be able to break through and punch a hole through the enemy line and go back there and wreak some havoc. And you got too many riflemen or whatever it's dragging along, it's just going to slow it down. Instead of having tracked armor speed, it's going to have foot speed or whatever. So specializing these units, I think, is really important. And I'm going to talk here just for a second. Now, let's pull up a couple of units. And oh no, that's not what I want to do. We want to let's compare. Let's look at one of my favorite comparisons here. We're going to look at the infantry gun, and we're going to compare the infantry gun to the mortar. Where's mortar at? Right there. And let's look at some combat stats here. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to give you an explanation of what these stats do and how they affect the ability of this unit to fight. And to me, I like to know. I like to get into the game, and I want to know what these stats do, because it's going to be a determining factor for me on how I'm going to build this unit and what I want this unit to specialize in. So, some of these stats in here, admittedly, I really couldn't find a lot of information on it, and it's really hazy to me exactly what they do. One of those is PowerPoints. But let's just start at the top here. Initiative on attack, initiative on defense. All initiative is it's a likelihood in a basic combat round. Okay, let's say you engage in combat. You have a unit that attacks another unit, whatever the composition of that unit is. If you have enough action points, you may have, say, as many as, say, 10 rounds of combat. I guess there are special circumstances, because a typical round of combat is going to use around 10 action points. There are circumstances where the combat rounds might actually go further than that for airborne attacks, amphibious assaults, things like that. And I think those are maxed out at 30 combat rounds or something like that. But okay, so these stats affect just one combat round. So let's go into a combat round. Now, when you're on attack, some units actually suffer a little bit of a penalty. I don't know if that's mentioned here. Some units suffer a slight penalty on attack, and I think for an infantry gun, the penalty really only applies to the first turn, but for some units it applies to first turns. It gets a little bit of a penalty on attack in the first round or two. For infantry type units generally is what that affects. I think armor units don't really suffer it. But let's look right here. Okay, on attack, this initiative really is going to determine when it's looking at all your units, your riflemen, everything else you got in this stack that's going to be contributing this attack, bazooka, whatever. This number here is going to, the higher this number is, the higher the chance that it's going to get to fire early in that round. And whatever it rolls, however the algorithm works there, if it ends up being, say, second to fire or third or fourth to fire out of all your units in that round, it's going to be the fourth guy to fire in every consecutive attack that occurs in that combat round. How many attacks is it going to get? Well, it tells you right here. In a combat round, this infantry gun is going to get 2 attacks. And the mortar is going to get 5 attacks. But the initiative is going to determine the order it goes in. I don't know if that necessarily translates into an advantage. I mean, I guess if it gets an early kill on something, and you know that unit is unable to become a factor in later combat rounds because you killed it, then you know, I guess maybe there is some kind of advantage to that, or yeah, I guess, I don't know. Any advantage there might be to coming early in there, I think, is kind of minimal. I mean, it's hard to imagine it being a big advantage to me. Now, this is quite an advantage, though, being able to have 5 attacks per. Now the nice comparison between these two, too, and I think I'll talk about that more, is the mortar costs 500 production to build. The infantry gun costs 1,000. So you could build 2 mortar for every infantry gun, not including anything you might have to build extra to get decent movement out of this, like creating a horse unit or something. Alright, so the infantry gun is going to get 2 attacks, and mortar is going to get 5 attacks. And each attack is going to try to find its favorite target. Here's the chances down here, and then it's going to, whether it hits or not is going to be determined by these numbers over here, and we'll get to that. Let's move on down here. This is the number of times it can be attacked in a combat round. These are both rear-end type weapons. So the only time they're going to get attacked is when units are able to break through in a particular combat round, able to break through your line, your meat shield, your rifleman or whatever, and actually be able to get a shot at these rear-end weapons. So that's not going to happen very often. I honestly think these stats for these particular weapons, there's not a whole lot of advantage there really towards the mortar, even though the mortar can only be attacked 5 times before it gets a penalty, as opposed to that, except for maybe in a possible case of an air attack, because air assaults are actually able to kind of bypass that meat shield and get into the rear areas and get more attacks off than, say, a rifleman would be able to do, or a light tank or something. So in that case, I think that's really what makes this stat in particular, I think, is one of the big reasons why like a gun, an artillery gun, like an infantry gun or an anti-tank gun, is more vulnerable to an air attack than, say, a mortar, because of this number right here. It's able to be attacked more by the air attack unit. Ground units, any ground unit is going to have a hard time attacking this mortar. It's going to have a hard time even getting 5 attacks on these guys, so let alone 10. So I don't think there's much advantage there, really. Stack points, we'll talk about that in a minute. Favorite tries. This is how many tries a unit has being able to attack its favorite target. The game seems a little ambiguous as to telling you exactly what the favorite target is for a particular weapon system. I've kind of operated off of you know, some of it's pretty obvious, and I kind of operate off of that. Like a light armor, its favorite target clearly is going to be infantry. A heavy armor unit, clearly its favorite target is going to be armor. An infantry gun is going to be infantry. Mortar most likely is going to be infantry. So the favorite target is A bazooka, his favorite target is going to be armor. So how this works right here is it will get a number of tries. So let's say the enemy unit has 40 units in it. It's going to randomly pick one, and then in this case he gets 2 tries. It's going to randomly pick one. If it doesn't get his favorite unit on the first try, it's going to randomly be able to pick 2, and then it's going to pick. It probably is just going to randomly pick 2, and then it's going to grab his favorite unit out of the 2. This one's going to get 5 tries, so it's going to be more likely to hit an infantry unit. But I don't know if that's too big of a disadvantage for the mortar here. Of course, now also you got to consider you're getting 2 mortar for the price of that 1, so really you're almost going to be like 4 versus 5. You're going to be pretty dead even. But with these types of weapon systems, you're mostly going to be attacking infantry stacks, enemy units that are stacked with a lot of infantry, because that's what they're designed for. That's what you're going to be wanting to use them for. So even if it only gets 2 tries, it's still more likely going to be able to go out there and hit itself an infantry unit. Now, if it actually gets a hit, that's where these numbers here down here play a factor. But let's go ahead and take a look over here. This is what's going to determine whether or not it gets a hit. Okay? Let's say there's no other factors at play here now. No experience, no terrain factors, anything like that. Just, I don't know, I guess straight up flat terrain. There's no special bonuses one side has or the other, being more experienced or anything. Your infantry gun is going to attack an infantry unit at 200 points. Your mortar is going to attack an infantry unit at 100 points. An infantry unit has 100 hit points. So how you're going to determine whether or not you score a hit is going to be, say this mortar is going to roll a number between 0 and 100. And then the enemy infantry unit is going to roll a number between 0 and 100. If your mortar ends up with a number higher than that infantry unit, then it scores a hit. So yes, this infantry gun is going to be, I guess, twice as likely, or maybe even more than twice as likely to score a hit on that infantry, since it's rolling a number between 0 and 200 instead of 0 and 100 against a infantry unit that rolls a number between 0 and 100. So it's going to be a lot more likely to score a hit. And when you look at that, you're like, oh man, I definitely want to go with infantry gun. Except that you can have 2 mortar for the price of that and 1 infantry gun. So that kind of evens out a little bit of a wash there on that. But that's how that works. Now, if it scores a hit, which we already know now, the infantry gun is twice as likely to score a hit as a mortar. If it scores a hit, it's actually, the infantry gun actually has a greater chance once again of actually damaging that unit, and that's where these come in. If it scores a hit, it has a 15% chance of killing that unit. These numbers right here too, I believe, are very specifically influenced by experience. So experience will actually increase that. I think it's is it 1%? I can't remember, but I'd have to look into that. But the experience actually influences this number right here. The higher the experience, the higher the percentage of getting that kill is going to be. So if you got a unit with 80 anti-tank gun with 80 experience, it's actually going to have a pretty decent effect on that number. So this has a 15% chance versus a 10%. It's 50% more likely to get a kill. It is 100% twice as likely to cause a retreat, because it's also a 20% chance it might just force the unit to retreat. And then I guess the rest of the variables are it scored a hit but did nothing. Did not kill, did not force a retreat on that particular subformation of infantry that it was attacking. Like I said, I'm not too sure how PowerPoint plays into all that. So if you look at the cost per benefit analysis between infantry gun and a mortar, and you got to factor into that the infantry gun, it's slow. It doesn't have foot movement like the mortar does. It's slower. So in order to get it up to a speed that's similar to the mortar, actually be slightly faster, you got to attach a horse to it. You have to attach a horse. So that increases really the production value of this up to 1,200 versus 1,000 for 2 mortars. It will take you 4 raw to build 2 mortars, 5 raw to build 1 infantry gun, so that's pretty close, slight advantage to mortar there. So on a cost per benefit analysis, I see mortar slightly wins out on that. But that's not the whole story. The thing I like about the infantry gun here is that once you get a factory online, and factories are good, you got to build factories in your game. You build a factory, that factory will pay for itself in 5 turns. In my book, after 5 turns, you're getting free production, minus the cost of the raw materials it takes to build that unit. And then that, I think, swings the pendulum, which right now is slightly leaning to mortar, to possibly slightly leaning towards the infantry gun once you get later in the game, past those initial beginning turns, when it becomes more cost effective to actually build infantry guns as opposed to mortar, because you can build them in factories. They more or less do the same thing. These are very similar units. Another area that you're never going to be able to get past, though, is, let's say production's not a factor for you. Trying to squeeze as much production out of your cities as you can and field the largest possible, most powerful armor you can out of your production. Let's say production is not as big of an issue. You've got lots of production and a very small, narrow line you need to focus on. So you want to actually get as much power into a single 100 stack points as you can. Then infantry gun is not going to win out over mortar, because for starters, a mortar has 1 stack point, and infantry's got 5. So in terms of stack points, you can squeeze 5 mortar into the space of 1 infantry gun. 5 mortar are going to be at least twice as powerful as an infantry gun in that situation. So when it comes to actually squeezing as much power into 100 stack points as you can, mortar's always going to win out in that situation. Let's have a look at some example units I built here in the TOE system. Here's like a basic rifle unit I built right here. All the units I've built in this TOE system right here as examples are units that I've tried and tested in actual gameplay, and I found worked in different situations. Worked well for me. Now, this unit, this would be a good early unit to build, because, you know, if you just build rifle units by themselves, they're pretty decent at defending. I mean, they do okay. They've got no offensive punch at all. No real power. So if you don't add something to it, they give it a little punch and give it a little power by themselves, they're, you know, they might make good garrisons if you let them entrench really deep, but they're not going to be an effective tool for you to use offensively at all. That's where the mortars come in. We just seen the stats on a mortar. Mortars can be pretty powerful. Compared to a rifle, there's a lot more power there. Let's go ahead and look at that comparison here real quick. Let's see here. We want to compare the rifleman to the mortar. Right there. Okay, here's a rifle versus infantry. Yeah, rifle attack at 13, mortar attacks at 100. Now when they're attacking infantry, all infantry, I think except for bazooka maybe, all infantry type units have 100 hit points. That is if they're not upgraded. A level 2 rifle exam I think has 125. But so you're rolling 0 without any modifiers. No modifiers. You're rolling between 0 and 13. He's rolling between 0 and 100 to try and score a hit with that infantry unit. Okay, as opposed to 0 and 100 against 0 and 100. So clear. Oh, excuse me. This over here. As opposed to 0 and 100 against 0 and 100. So clearly the 0 and 100 against, yeah, that's how I should be doing it. Clearly the mortar is going to have a much higher chance of scoring a hit on those riflemen, and it's going to be taking them down a lot faster. Also, look at the number of attacks. Okay, this mortar is going to get to attack 5 times in a combat round as opposed to 1 time for that rifle. So this rifleman is going to get 1 shot They roll into 0 and 13 to try and hit a rifleman. This guy's going to get 5 chances, so he's going to score. This mortar is going to score some hits, and whether those hits pan out into kills or retreats or whatever, the only real benefit now, the infantry's got this. He has a 25% chance of a 10, but when you're getting 5 chances to attack, and the likelihood of actually scoring a hit is, I don't know, 4 or 5 times higher, then yeah, you can see the offensive power that this mortar is going to offer to this unit. Mortar is, I think, one of the more powerful land units in the game. Land subformations, maybe I should say. Armor is probably the most powerful, but it's definitely packs a lot of punch for what it costs. Let's go back in here in the TOE system and look at our example units again. So this would be a bare bones situation right here. This would be, say, early in the game when your production is limited and you just want to build as most powerful unit you can for the least amount of production cost as you can, but a unit that has offensive capability. You're not adding things like trucks or half tracks or anything like that, horses, to try and increase the mobility. You're just relying purely off of foot power right here, how fast it can move. You're not adding anything here to slow it down, because if you add a gun to it, then you're going to have to add a horse to it. You're going to be slowing it way down. Later on, you can start to modify this. You can add some horses to it if you want. If you're having to deal with, you start to get some gun factories online or whatever, and you're playing against the AI. If the AI has a lot of production capacity, like a lot of cities, or you're playing AI Plus, which doubles their production, or Plus Plus, which I think gives them a 250% boost in production, something along those lines, then the AI is going to produce more armor cars. It seems like the more production the AI perceives it has, based off of how spread out they are, the more likely they are to produce armor cars, and they will come in with huge stacks, armor cars, light tanks, things like that. And the only way to really deal with them is you got to get some anti-armor capability in there. The mortar has some anti-armor capability, but nothing like, say, an anti-tank gun or bazooka could bring to the table. So you need to focus on that. Now, in a cost, I'm not going to do one right here, but I can tell you in a cost per benefit analysis, the AT gun does slightly win out over a bazooka. Also has the benefit of being a rear end type weapon, as opposed to the bazooka, which is a front line weapon. Bazooka men are going to die. You're going to have a hard time building up their experience because of that. The anti-tank gun as a rear end weapon is much more survivable, much more likely to build up high experience. High experience means increased chances of getting a kill, increased chances of causing a retreat. It increases the chance of scoring a hit. It influences a lot of things when it comes to that. Also, the anti-tank gun can be built in a factory. Remember what I told you about factories? Big advantage there. There is some debate that you could get into if you're facing, say, heavy tanks. Would an anti-tank gun be better against heavy tanks than a bazooka? And there's some who feel that the bazooka would actually fare better, and that kind of situation might be a better place to invest in. I haven't looked too deeply into that, but I know that is up for discussion there. And like I said, as you get later in the game, you might want to, and you're spending more and more production on just supplies to supply your guys. And what little production you got left, you need to build the riflemen to make replacements, and you just can't afford to be constantly pumping out these expensive mortars anymore. And then that's when you start looking at gun factories. That's when the infantry gun starts looking good, because they can take the place of those mortars, and they're not going to cost your cities any production capacity at all, because you're going to have them be built by gun factories. Another possibility might be going something like this right here. You get a lot. That's probably the equivalent of, I don't know, 5, maybe 6 mortar right there, having these 2 infantry gun. Now, like I said before, if production is not a problem for you, you got lots of production in excess, and you just want to pack as much punch as you can into your 100 stack points. You notice all these units I'm building here are 50 stack point units. I like to build them that way because to me it gives me more flexibility. I can spread these units out to cover a greater area, or I can stack them up too high so I can concentrate force on a particular point in the line. That's why I do that, as opposed to building 100 stack units. Nothing wrong with building 100 stack units. But if you get in a situation where you want to pack as much power into your 100 stack points as you can, then you can look at something like this. This is if production now is not really a problem for you. You got lots of production in excess. But you have a very narrow line, and you want to pack as much power into that very narrow line as you can. This isn't a very expensive infantry unit right here. But this packs quite a wallop. You got 30 mortars packed into this 100 stack points. That's going to pack a heck of a punch. As far as things like armor goes, like I said before, you don't want to slow these guys down. You want to have some infantry in there, because what infantry is going to do is going to draw fire away from these tanks. You could go up to, say, 20 infantry right here. 20 infantry with 4 light tanks, and it's not going to slow the tanks down. And it's going to put a lot more targets out here, so when let's say enemy anti-tank or whatever is firing, or enemy armor is firing, and it's going to be a lot more infantry it's going to be picking, as opposed, so there's a chance when it's doing its favorite tries that it may end up just hitting nothing but infantry. So it is going to draw at least some fire away from that armor, and it's going to make the armor just a little bit more survivable. And these guys, just to warn you, they're going to die. They're going to die like crazy attached to this armor unit. But they're cheap, and you keep replacing them. All they are is just a little diversion to try and divert some of the fire away from those tanks to keep the tanks more survivable, so they can build more experience and become more powerful. An example of a mechanized unit might be something like this here, where you have half tracks hauling on these guys. Now you got stuff here that can all be built in factories. Good later unit, later game type unit right here. These guys can keep up with your tanks. These half tracks are very fast. They're also pretty durable. You can haul along a couple guns. These things built in gun factories. That's building in a tank factory. The only thing you're building in the city right here, rifles. So, you know, you want to build units that that will, I don't know, they'll fit your play style. At the same time, you know, you got to be cognizant of what these units can do, what they're capable of. Submachine guns, for example, I mean, they're great in urban, great in forest. But if you're looking at a map, say like this, look at this map right here. This is mostly just plains, farmland, hills. You got a little bit of forest down here, a couple of urbans. Is it really worth the investment of putting submachine guns in your unit like that when 90% of the terrain your units are going to be fighting in for something that this submachine gun is going to get penalized for? I would say that you're better specializing. Just having 20 rifle instead of 15 rifle and 5 submachine guns, because in 90% of the time when you're out there fighting, these guys are going to hurt you. They're not going to help you. You're going to suffer a penalty because of them. So you got to think about that. You know, you can build specialized submachine gun units if you're in an area that's fighting in an area. You're fighting in this area where there's a lot of forest. It might actually be worthwhile to do it. Or maybe this area where there's a lot of forest. And then you might want to build some specialized units. So that's my recommendation. That's a good strategy, and I think a good tip is you build your units, specialize them, tailor fit them to your play style, and consider, now that I've told you what these stats do, consider these stats and how they're going to affect the game. Consider whether or not you can build it in a factory as opposed to build it in the city. And then develop also an army that's suited to your opponent. You know the AI is very predictable. You're playing a human, they're not so predictable. Humans are less likely to throw as much armor at you. They're more likely to throw infantry at you. So build your units so they specialize better against infantry. Anyway, just some food for thought there. I hope these tactics and strategies will help you out in your gameplay. Thanks for watching, folks.